Hello, Extempor's Bible podcast listeners. I'm your co-host, Vasu, and today we're going to be talking about Extemp 101. But before we begin, I just have two quick announcements. First, as I'm recording this, it's early January, so I just want to wish everyone a happy New Year's. Here at the Extempor's Bible, we have a lot of things planned, ranging from publishing articles, preparing questions, and producing phenomenal Extemp episodes. Second, I just wanted to say that if you're looking towards this episode, specifically as it is Extemp 101, make sure that you might provide it to an individual who could use it, potentially a novice entering the team, or even someone who's dabbling into Extemp right now, as I think this episode is particularly geared towards that audience. With that said, I do think anyone could benefit from getting a refresher on the fundamentals of Extemp, but it is geared towards our newer Extempers as a whole. Now, without further ado, let's begin today's episode, Extemp 101. So starting with, why should you even do extemporaneous speaking? The answer is pretty simple. It's the best event available. But biases aside, extemporaneous speaking allows you to do a lot of things, ranging from becoming a more persuasive person to, alongside that, having the profound ability to inform about global events in a manner that is impromptu or without much preparation. And through developing this skill, you'll not only gain the understanding of global events at a much higher degree, but you'll simultaneously grow your speaking abilities, which can help you in the long run and throughout your whole entire career. So now that we're done with why extemporaneous speaking, let's move on to what is extemporaneous speaking. So at the high school level, extemporaneous speaking is a 30-minute preparation category, followed by a 7.5-minute speech at maximum, though I will qualify that most speeches are roughly anywhere from 6:30 to 7-minute speeches are, inside my experience, the best of the best speeches. Keep in mind that you should check your state circuit's rules, because in some state circuits, from what I've heard, if you go a second over 7, it's looked down upon. Now, I can personally provide all the Massachusetts extempers a bit of relief as I'm on the state circuit. You can go anywhere from 0.001, so 1 second, to 7 minutes 29 and 99 milliseconds, and it won't really change the judge's interpretation. Now, obviously, don't give a 1 second speech, but if you go 7 minutes 29 seconds, I wouldn't worry about it, because on our state circuit, you have the grace period and you're allowed to use it to its maximum capacity. However, I do emphasize, check on your state circuit what the rules are. But now let's move on to what is an extemporaneous speech. So an extemporaneous speech is actually seen in two different ways. So there's one method which you'll use 99.9% of the time, and another method that you'll use 0.01% of the time. But I do think it's very valuable to know both methods, because inside those odd cases where you're going to have to use a different type of analysis, the second method can save the day. So with that said, let's analyze the first method, unified analysis. So you've actually probably already done unified analysis to some capacity throughout grade school or even early years of high school. That's because we're taught at a very early level the 5-paragraph essay, an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And while certainly this method is useful in communication, specifically writing, it's also very helpful in oral presentations as well. The reason for that is the unified analysis has some unique qualities. First, it provides a clear structure that's very relatable. That's why you're going to use it 99.9% of the time. But second, you're able to see that by using unified analysis, you can actually strengthen the impact of your points. Because let's say you provide 3 different points, and your judge only likes 2 of them. Well, it's not certainly going to be a bad thing, because that third point might have minimal impact on your ranking. Now imagine if you only presented one idea and your judge didn't like that idea. Now certainly that could be harmful, but as you can see, by having 3 distinctive points, you're only strengthening your analysis as a whole across the board. That's why 99.9% of times, you'll use unified analysis, which is an introduction, roughly 1 minute 30, then you move on to your 3 body points, which are roughly 1 minute 30 as well. At this moment, you would have completed 6 minutes of the speech, and you have a comfortable 1 minute 30 seconds to complete your conclusion. Now, a conclusion typically should only take a minute, but it is always nice to have that 30-second grace period in case you need to go over or under on something, and make sure that you're around that 6:30 to 7:30 ballpark. Now that we've discussed the benefits of unified analysis, let's move on to layered analysis. Now, as mentioned, this tactic is used very, very, very rarely. And the reason I say that is throughout the last 3.5 years of me conducting extemporaneous speaking at my local, state, and national level tournaments, I haven't come across an opportunity where I particularly felt comfortable or that I needed to use layered analysis. That said, I've seen some of the greatest extempors nationwide use layered analysis speeches every now and then. So I feel like it's only right to share that methodology to make sure that you have this as an option when you go inside your extemporaneous speaking rounds. Now, what is layered analysis? It's exactly what it sounds like. So layered analysis is the process in which you have, contrary to 3 independent points, you have 1 dependent point. Now, let me elaborate. When you do layered analysis, the key difference is all of your points rely on the past point. So if the question was, are tensions in Russia and Ukraine de-escalating? And potentially you might have answered yes. You would have to prove a couple of things. First, that tensions were high in the past, tensions are low now, and in a great extemporaneous speech, you'd show causation. You'd show different forms of evidence of how this took place, and you'd provide great background information. Now, while certainly for that specific question, you have the ability to use unified analysis. You would just have to get a little creative. But if you chose to, you could use layered analysis, which could be helpful. The reason is layered analysis is the ability to basically inform your audience about a concept that's very complex, but it is only one idea in a lot of detail. For example, you might have an introduction, which is exactly like inside the unified analysis speech. But your first point might be, what has led to the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Your second point might be, how has the Russia-Ukraine conflict escalated? And your third point might be, how has the Russia-Ukraine conflict de-escalated? By particularly emphasizing it inside this specific order, you're creating structure within your speech because now audience members, judges, and any other viewers are all having a clear understanding of where you're going. You're going from this broad idea inside your first body point to a more clear, concise idea in your second point, and finally, with answering the question in your third point. Now, similar to a layered analysis, or rather unified analysis speech, it would be roughly the same amount of time splits, 1 minute 30 on your introduction, 1 minute 30 on the point where you're trying to explain the background, 1 minute 30 on where you're trying to explain the causation, and finally, 1 minute 30 where you provide a clear, substantive answer that's built on the past information presented in the speech. Now, if you do this in that order, I assure you that a layered analysis speech could be very, very useful. Now that we've talked about this, I want to start talking about substructure at a very basic level. If you're interested in substructure, I highly recommend that you actually go to the Extempor's Bible Podcast Spotify, maybe even scroll down a couple of episodes to where you get to the not so subpar substructure episode, which is actually hosted by me. So I absolutely recommend you check it out because I know it's a great episode. But jokes aside, it is a pretty good episode, but we got to keep on going. So aside from that episode, I do want to cover substructure ever so slightly inside this episode. Substructure is the idea that inside a point itself, you do something specific that could make it easier for the judge to understand. Now, the most basic of basic substructures are past, present, future. In the past, Russia-Ukraine was at conflict. In the present, we're able to see that Putin has claimed that he wants to talk about peace with Ukrainian leader Zelensky. And finally, the future. Through doing this, we'll be able to see how millions of Ukrainians and millions of Russians who never intended for the war to take place in the first place will be able to survive. Now, as you can see, this was a very developed point in the sense that it has a structure that you can see. And if you do that for each 3 of your points, it makes the judge naturally, even if they don't even think about it, realize that this is a very coherent speech. If I realize that each of your points go past, present, future, past, present, future, past, present, future, I automatically feel like you're speaking in a more coherent, organized way, which can be beneficial. Now, there's different kinds of substructure, which I might add. There's also theory, practice, impact. Alongside that, there's cause, effect, impact. And a lot of these different methodologies you kind of just create with the question. I will say that there is an Extempor's Bible slideshow presentation on our website that you should check out if you're more interested inside some of these methods. But overall, as you can see, this is the simplification of an extemporaneous speaking speech. But I do want to leave you with this. Regardless of if the substructure is a complicated idea or not, keep in mind that it's beneficial to have an A, B, and C within your unified analysis and layered analysis body points. The reason is, you could have sources for your A and B, and your C should always be about impact. And if you're looking for some advice on what your impacts could be, well, you've come to the right place. As I like to call it, and my captain actually, when I was a freshman, called it, there are 3 P's: people, power, and prosperity. So you can always impact to people, power, and prosperity, and a lot of the times you can even impact to 2. But I mainly suggest at the state, maybe even early national outrounds, make sure to leave it at 1, because you don't want to do something too risky that could potentially lower your ranking. But at the same time, it's because if you take risks, it could be the difference between a 1 and a 2, that you should really think about it and think what's best for you and what are you most comfortable delivering. Because I will say this, regardless of how well organized or developed your speech is, for all extemporaneous speakers, one thing is needed: confidence. If you're confident in the speech that you're delivering, it will show. And when it does show, it'll only benefit your ranking. So with that, I hope that Extemp 101 has helped you in numerous ways by first teaching you what is extemporaneous speaking, by second, showing you what the different type of extemporaneous speeches are, and finally, by giving you an introduction into substructure. Now, if you happen to think that this episode is helpful or could be helpful to anyone else, feel free to share it. But that is your favorite, oh, did I say favorite? Co-host signing out, Vasu. I hope you have a great 2025 and a great week as a whole.